I'm Rachel Dawson, a 42-year-old nurse from Asheville, North Carolina. What I'm about to tell you is my near-death experience account of what happened when Jesus revealed the shocking truth about Psalm 23. I witnessed firsthand how, when properly implemented and understood, Psalm 23 can literally change our lives. This started on February 17, 2019, with a devastating car accident that nearly killed me. But before we begin, please tell me where you're listening. It will be nice to feel closer, even if we are physically separated. Furthermore, remember to like and comment on what you thought of this near-death experience testimony. Make this channel a fair and open forum for learning from each other. Enjoy listening. The day began like any other. The roads were icy from an overnight freeze, and as I headed out for my early shift, I said a quick prayer for safety, not knowing what lay ahead. As I drove down a steep hill about 10 minutes from the hospital, unexpected headlights appeared around a dangerous curve, my tires lost traction, and I desperately struggled to regain control. Suddenly, everything became dark. I later discovered that my car had slid into oncoming traffic and been struck directly on the driver's side. The impact was devastating, resulting in severe internal injuries, a ruptured aorta, and traumatic brain injury. Later, the medical team informed me that, by all accounts, I should not have survived even the first few minutes. Then, in the gap between life and death, everything changed. One moment I was caught up in the chaos of the accident, and the next I was detached from the turmoil below. I recall a sensation of floating, of being gently lifted from chaos and pain into perfect peace. There was no fear, just a profound sense of clarity unlike anything I'd ever experienced. I could see my broken body beneath me, surrounded by medical personnel working feverishly, their voices muffled as if they were coming from a long distance. I had no attachment to the scene unfolding beneath me. Instead, I was drawn to a warm, radiant light that appeared to surround me completely. As I approached it, I became aware of a loving, powerful, and strangely familiar presence, although I had never seen him before. And then he arrived. Jesus. He was not as I had imagined him from Sunday school pictures or movie portrayals, but genuine and gloriously alive. His eyes were filled with compassion, as if he knew everything about me, every struggle, joy, and secret thought, and loved me unconditionally. Rachel, he said, and hearing my name in his voice made me feel at home. You have questions. It was not a question but rather a statement of understanding. And he was correct. In that moment, all of my life's questions about purpose, suffering, and why faith can be so difficult rose to the surface of my consciousness. Why am I here? Jesus smiled and extended his hand, saying, "Walk with me." As I took his hand, the scene around us changed. We were standing in a lush green meadow that stretched as far as I could see. The grass beneath our feet was vibrant and alive, swaying gently in a breeze I could feel but not hear. In the distance, I could see crystal-clear waters reflecting light in ways that made them appear almost alive. "Do you recognize this place?" Jesus inquired. I looked around, feeling a strange sense of familiarity, though I was certain I had never been here before. "It feels like I should know it," I replied hesitantly. "These are the shepherd's green pastures and still waters," he said. I whispered Psalm 23, which you may have read many times but never truly seen. David's words are beyond beautiful poetry, written from the heart of a shepherd who understands what it means to care for his flock, Rachel. They are a promise and a reality that most people never fully grasp during their earthly lives. As we walked through this heavenly landscape, Jesus began to unfold the deeper truths of Psalm 23 in ways that penetrated to the very core of my being, saying, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." When David wrote these words, he was not making a religious statement, but rather declaring an intimate, personal, and completely transformative relationship. Having a shepherd means being known, led, and protected. It means never having to find your own way through life's darkest valleys. As he spoke, I recalled moments from my life when I had attempted to manage everything on my own, moments of exhaustion when I had marginalized God, and seasons when I felt utterly alone, despite my intellectual understanding of God's presence. "I don't understand," I said softly. "I believed in you, but I didn't really understand what it meant to have a shepherd," Jesus replied. The world instills self-reliance in children from a young age. There is often a hidden pressure, even within faith communities, to manage independently, possess all the answers and project strength. But the first step to experiencing the fullness of my care is recognizing your need for a shepherd. We kept walking, and with each step, I felt myself absorbing truths that seemed both new and ancient, as if my soul had always known them but my mind had never fully grasped them. Many people have misunderstood Jesus' words, "I shall not want," as a promise of material prosperity or a life free of difficulties. They are a declaration of sufficiency. "In me you have everything you truly need." He paused and questioned, "Rachel, to what extent has the fear of insufficient resources shaped your life? Is there enough money, enough time, enough love, and enough security?" The question pierced me deeply. I could clearly see how my anxiety about not having enough had driven many of my decisions, robbed me of peace, and kept me striving when I could have rested in God's provision. Even when things were going well, I was concerned about the future, which is why David's declaration is so powerful. Jesus explained, "We arrived at the brink of a pristine stream. Although physical needs are important to me, it's about a soul-deep assurance that frees you from fear and want." The water flowed with a gentle rhythm that seemed to create music without sound. He makes me lie down in green pastures and leads me beside still waters. As Jesus spoke these words, I felt a profound weariness that I hadn't realized I was carrying begin to lift from my spirit. "Your world values constant activity, productivity, and achievement," Jesus said, "and rest is viewed as weakness or indulgence. But in my kingdom, rest is sacred. It is in stillness that souls are restored." I reflected on my life, the constant busyness, the never-ending to-do lists, the way I collapsed into exhausted sleep most nights only to wake up to more demands the next day. I can't recall the last time I truly rested. I confessed, and this is why so many of my children live with depleted spirits. Jesus responded, "The green pastures and still waters aren't just poetic images, Rachel. They represent my invitation to regular intentional rest in my presence, not as a reward for hard work, but as a necessary component of spiritual health." As he spoke, Jesus led me to sit beside the stream, and the peace there was palpable, almost like a living thing that enveloped me completely. We sat in silence for what seemed like an eternity, and in that silence, I felt more deeply known and loved than in all the words and affirmations I had ever received. Finally, Jesus said, "This is what I offer." He restores my soul, Jesus continued. Not an absence of activity, but a presence of peace that sustains you through everything. Tears welled up in my eyes as I realized how rarely I had experienced such profound rest, how I had mistaken brief distractions for true restoration. Rachel, soul restoration is more than emotional comfort. It fundamentally changes you, healing wounds you may not even know you have. I didn't realize how broken I was, I whispered. I could see how disappointments, betrayals, losses, failures, and even the minor daily injuries that come with living in a broken world had shaped my reactions, defenses, and fears. Most people become so accustomed to living with their wounds that they mistake their injured state for normal, but I see every hurt and every scar, and my desire is always to restore. As he spoke, I felt waves of healing rush through my entire being. Memories that had once been painful were touched by something that did not erase them but rather transformed their power over me. Places of bitterness softened. It was as if every dark corner of my soul was being illuminated and cleansed, and old resentments vanished. Jesus explained that this restoration is not a one-time event. It's an ongoing process, a continuous healing that occurs as you walk with me. The path of this healing is what David described next. "He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake," I said. "Yes," Jesus nodded. The paths of righteousness aren't just about following rules or meeting religious expectations. They're about living in ways that reflect who I truly am and who you were meant to be. As he spoke, I could see a path winding through the meadow, gently ascending toward distant mountains. Unlike the world's wide, crowded highways, this path seemed intimately personal, as if designed specifically for individual journeys. Jesus clarified that when you follow this path, you are not merely following orders. Rather, you are finding your actual identity as my beloved child. You're learning to live from a place of security rather than fear, generosity rather than scarcity, and truth rather than deception. I reflected on times in my life when I reduced righteousness to rule following moral performance that left me feeling either superior or ashamed depending on how well I thought I was doing. "I believe I misunderstood righteousness," I said. "Many do," he said, "but righteousness is not a standard you must achieve. It is a path you walk with me, and the purpose of this path is not to earn my approval but to reveal my character for his sake. When you walk in my ways, the world sees me more clearly through you. The landscape changed as we walked on. The bright meadow gradually gave way to a shadowed valley, with steep cliffs rising on either side and the path narrowing. There was still light, but it was muted, creating a solemn atmosphere that felt heavy with significance. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will not fear evil, for you are with me, Jesus said as we entered the valley. Although the valley was not frightening, there was a palpable sense of danger and uncertainty. Every life has valleys, Rachel, times of loss, grief, uncertainty, and yes, even death, and I never promised my followers that they would be exempt from them. What I promised was my presence within them. I reflected on the accident that had brought me here, the unexpected intrusion of death into what had appeared to be a routine day. I reflected on other valleys I had walked, such as my second-year miscarriage, my father's long battle with cancer, and the year my son struggled with depression. I confessed that the valleys were the most difficult times for me to feel your presence, and while it appeared that you were distant or silent, Jesus responded that I was closer than ever. In the valleys I am more than just your shepherd. I am also your companion. In this verse, the psalm shifts from speaking about me to speaking to me. You are with me. As we walk deeper into the valley, I noticed Jesus carrying a shepherd's rod and staff, which he skillfully used to guide our steps, occasionally moving obstacles aside or testing the stability of the path ahead. The valley is where relationships progress from theology to intimacy. I murmured, your rod and your staff, they comfort me. As I watched his movements, Jesus explained that the rod and staff represent both my protection and my guidance. Shepherds use the rod to defend their sheep from predators. The staff was accustomed to providing guidance, gently correcting, and occasionally rescuing a sheep in danger. I reflected on the various ways I had experienced God's guidance in my life, sometimes through gentle nudges of conscience or inspiration, other times through painful redirection or discipline. I haven't always welcomed your corrections, Jesus replied, but a shepherd's correction is always motivated by love and protection, never by rejection or punishment. My discipline isn't about punishing you for your mistakes. It's about guiding you back to the right path. As we continued through the valley, I noticed something unexpected. In a small clearing surrounded by towering cliffs, a table was beautifully set as if for a celebration, with fresh bread, wine, and an abundance of food. Most surprisingly, seated around the table were shadowy figures who appeared to represent various challenges and difficulties I had faced in life. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies, Jesus said, gesturing toward the scene. Why would you set a feast here? I asked, why not wait until we're out of the valley away from them? Jesus explained that true provision isn't about the absence of challenges, but about abundance in the midst of them. I don't always remove difficulties, but I always provide strength to face them. The table represents my sustaining grace that feeds your spirit, even in life's most difficult seasons. As he spoke, I realized with new clarity how God's provision had manifested in my most difficult times, not always as an escape from problems but as strength, wisdom, and unexpected joy in the midst of them. Jesus led me to the table and motioned for me to sit, and as I did, he stood behind me and placed his hands on my head in a gesture of blessing. I remembered moments of inexplicable peace during my father's final days, provision that arrived just when finances were tightest, and friendships that deepened during difficult times. You anoint my head with oil, causing my cup to overflow. I felt something warm and fragrant flowing over me. Not physical oil, but a sense of being specially chosen, set apart and honored. Jesus explained that the anointing oil represents my spirit pouring out on your life. In ancient times, guests of honor were anointed with oil as a sign of welcome and esteem, and kings were anointed to represent their calling and authority. As I closed my eyes, I felt a spiritual anointing in every fiber of my being. It felt like I was being cleansed, filled, recognized, and commissioned all at once. I inquired about the overflowing cup. Jesus handed me a goblet, and as I watched, it filled with clear water that rose to the rim and then continued to rise, forming a perfect dome above the cup without spilling a drop. He explained that the overflowing cup represents the abundant life I offer. I stared at the impossibly full cup, understanding that it represented a life that defied natural limitations, a supernatural fullness that couldn't be explained by what was poured in. I whispered, I've settled for so much less. Many do, Jesus responded, accepting a half-full life when I offer overflow. They measure provision by what they can see rather than who I am. As we left the table and continued our journey, the valley began to widen, light became more abundant, and the path climbed gently upward. I felt stronger, more certain, and filled with an unshakable peace. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, Jesus said as we walked. Curious, I glanced behind us and was startled to see two radiant figures following at a short distance. Though they had distinct appearances, both emanated power and grace beyond description, which Jesus explained as goodness and mercy. I studied these figures with awe, not as abstract concepts but as active forces in the lives of those who walk with me. They follow you, not passively but in pursuit, ensuring that even the most difficult circumstances eventually lead to redemptive outcomes. Goodness appeared strong and generous, ready to bring blessing and provision, while mercy appeared gentle but resolute, carrying what appeared to be instruments of healing and restoration. They always followed me, even when you can't see them, even when circumstances appear to contradict their presence. Jesus assures you that nothing in your story will go to waste, that everything will be redeemed in the end. As the path continued to ascend, I could see ahead of us a structure that appeared to be made of living light. It had the shape of a house but seemed to exist in multiple dimensions at the same time, extending far beyond what my eyes could comprehend. And I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever, I said softly. Yes, Jesus responded. The shepherd's final promise is not only provision for this life, but eternal communion in the next. The house of the Lord is both a future hope and a present reality. As we approached this radiant dwelling, I felt an overwhelming sense of belonging, of coming home to a place I had never been but had always been meant to be. Every fiber of my being resonated with rightness, with a sense that this was the destination toward which my entire life had been moving, often without my conscious awareness. But as we got closer, something unexpected happened. Jesus came to a halt and turned to face me directly, saying, "Rachel, it is not yet time for you to fully enter this dwelling." Jesus answered, "Because you needed to see what awaits and because you have a message to carry back. You've experienced the reality of Psalm 23 in ways few have understood." Confusion and disappointment passed through my mind, but why show me if I can't stay? This wasn't just for you. It was for those who would hear your story. As he spoke, I felt a gentle but persistent pull, as if something was drawing me back from this place of perfect peace. Jesus explained that your body is responding to treatment, and that I have more for you to do in the world of the living. I felt tears well up in my eyes and whispered, "I would rather not leave you. Rachel, you are not leaving me. Everything you have experienced here, my shepherding, provision, protection, and presence, continues in your earthly life." Jesus took both of my hands in his. "After seeing it spiritually, you can live with it instead of just believing it intellectually." He placed his hand over my heart, and I'll take this experience back with me. Share the Shepherd Psalm's deeper truths with those who have reduced it to familiar words without experiencing its power. Tell them that I am more present, engaged, and committed to their well-being than they have dared to believe. The pulling sensation intensified. The radiant landscape around us began to fade slightly, like a beautiful scene viewed through increasingly frosted glass. "Will I remember everything?" "You will remember what is needed," Jesus assured me. "Perhaps not every detail, but the truth at the heart of each verse will be remembered. And when you read these words again, they will reawaken what you've experienced here." As the scene faded, Jesus spoke one last time, his voice somehow cutting through the growing distance between us. "Remember, Rachel, that I am your shepherd in every moment and circumstance." Then there was a rushing sensation, a moment of darkness, and the overwhelming intrusion of physical sensation, pain, beeping machines, voices speaking urgently, and the feeling of tubes and wires connected to my body. Allow the experience to transform how you live your life. I opened my eyes to the harsh lights of the ICU, feeling simultaneously the agony of my broken body and the lingering peace of where I had just been. The doctors called my recovery miraculous. By medical standards, I should not have survived the injuries I suffered. The trauma surgeon later told me that my heart had stopped 3 times during those critical first hours. "Whatever you experienced while you were gone," he said, "gave you an extraordinary will to live when you returned. That was 6 years ago. My physical recovery was long and painful, with multiple surgeries, months of rehabilitation, and learning to walk again. But through it all, I carried something that transformed even the most difficult days. The living reality of what I had experienced in those hours when my spirit had left my broken body. Psalm 23 was no longer just beautiful poetry to me. It had become the framework through which I understood my relationship with God and navigated every circumstance of life. When financial pressures mounted during my recovery, what I wanted was not a distant religious promise but a present reality I could lean into. A reminder that my shepherd's provision might not look like I expected but would always be sufficient. When anxiety about the future threatened to consume me, he led me beside still waters, calling me back to the peace I had experienced beside that heavenly stream. A peace available not only in eternity but also in present communion with my shepherd. When painful memories or bitterness tried to resurface, he restored my soul, reminding me of the deep healing I had experienced and continued to receive. A healing that worked for me inside out, addressing not just symptoms but. When well-meaning friends offered simplistic advice or judgment about my ongoing struggles, your rod and staff comforted me by reminding me that my shepherd's guidance, not human opinion, was my true source of. When I finally returned to part-time work at a rehabilitation center, using my own experience to help others through similar journeys, you anointed my head with oil, and my cup overflowing became my daily experience of purpose and fulfillment beyond what I could have imagined before the accident. And through it all, surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, has been my constant assurance that nothing, no pain, no setback, no difficulty, is wasted in God's. The final promise, I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever, has changed my perspective on death, which had previously terrified me despite my faith. I know firsthand that what awaits is not an unknown darkness, but a homecoming to the place my soul recognizes as its true dwelling. I share this story not to draw attention to my experience, but to offer what was given to me as a gift for others. Whether you take my story literally or metaphorically is less important than its message. The familiar words of Psalm 23 are more than just poetic comfort for difficult times. They are an invitation to a relationship that changes everything. More real, present, and transformative than most of us realize. The Lord is your shepherd. I don't know what valley you're walking through today, what enemies surround your table, or what emptiness you're attempting to fill. I don't know how you deal with challenges, accept blessings, understand your purpose, or anticipate eternity. I know this. The shepherd who revealed himself to me in the hours between life and death watches over you and loves you with unwavering goodness and mercy. His rod and staff are ready to guide and protect you, and his abundant provision awaits you if you open your hands to receive it. Allow the psalm to become your current reality. The Lord is your shepherd, and you will not go hungry.